Okay, this piece started in '97. It's actually what I consider work that is not an end in itself. It started with a headline in a government newspaper called the New Straits Times, and it was about, the headline was, alien vessel spotted refueling off mothership off an island in Malaysia. And in Malaysia there's a huge number of refugees and immigrants from Indonesia largely, and Thailand and the Philippines, and they always get called aliens. And that notion of the other, and I feel that they've been used in many ways for economic prosperity of the country, but there's no real interest in their well-being and their situation in Malaysia and stuff like that. So that kind of triggered me looking at racism in Malaysia, which I feel is very strong and a big problem. But in Malaysia there's a campaign by the government called the Muhibah campaign, which is actually very similar in terms of the British colonial days, where the Indians were in the rubber estates, the Malay in the kampung, the Chinese in the towns, the English in government and administrative roles. But anyway, so these days with the Muhibah campaign, it promotes unity between the races, but in actual fact what it does do is it segregates the races as to say, you are Indian, you are Chinese, you're not the same. You know, so recognize your difference from this person, and you live in your suburb and you live in your suburb. And the Muhibah campaign actually enforces, to me, actually enforces racism rather than fights against it. And so what the other thing about the Muhibah campaign is that it's largely there, not so much for interest in the various racial groups, but again for economic prosperity, because for the government to get going and to achieve their Malaysia Boleh Vision 2020, it's something that they have to do together, and they need the races to be driven in the same manner. Not that they're interested in the personal groups. To the Indians, the Chinese, I always feel that there's this, you see these dark little words down here that says get over it. And that's basically talking about the Chinese with their longing for their motherland of China, which a lot of Australians I think have with England, the talk of the motherland, even though they're third, fourth generation Malaysian Chinese. And part of the Vision 2020 of Malaysia to be this country of Malaysia is that in a sense you become less, you let go of your baggage or your history or your family, so that it's less about history and it's more about the future, which I find is a lot of people very lost, because they've lost a lot of where they came from and those old desires that they used to have, or what they wanted from life. And with the Indians is get over it, because the Indians in Malaysia have traditionally been the scapegoats and have been treated very badly from the state days onwards, and are in many ways expected to forget a lot of the racism that's been pointed towards them. And the Malays, it says very dark down the bottom, get with it. It's get with the program. It's the Malay culture, the spirit of Malay people has, to me, been suppressed a lot under the institution of Islam. Not Islam the religion, but the institution that, especially in states like Terengganu and Kelantan, which are very Islamic, it's not about the religion, it's about the enforced part of the institution of Islam that has suppressed a nature in Malay people that I think is very sad, and that they're losing that, and they're faking it. That's the double image, that they're attempting to be something that they're not, or pretending to suppress something which they are, which they may not fit in with the program, and they're wearing rose-colored glasses in this little world that they live in. And I, of course, fit in none of the above. My father is Kadazan from Sabah, north part of Borneo, above Brunei. Last state to join Malaysia. When you have an immigration form in Malaysia, you have to tick Malay, Chinese, Indian, other. I have, for my whole life, ticked other, because I do not fit into any other categories, but I'm actually from an Aboriginal in Sabah, a tribal group. But there's no category for me, even though I'm of the land, as opposed to the other people. And my mum's from New Zealand, and that's a whole nother story. They're wearing these numbers on their chest is their IC number, identity card number, and we all have one in Malaysia for, everything. My grandfather's from northern Shantung, China, so I'm very, very mixed. My grandmother is Kadazan. Yeah. But my grandmother, who is Bumiputra, which is what you would call Aboriginal, the phrase that they use, or from the soil. My father is termed Bumiputra, but I am not termed Bumiputra because my surname is Chinese. Therefore, I'm not given the honor of being called Bumiputra. Bumiputra are people that come from the tribal groups, be they Temuan people, Iban, Penan, or Kadazan, from the various parts of Malaysia, or you're a Malay, Islamic Malay, and then you automatically become Bumiputra. When you have the status of Bumiputra, you have a huge number of benefits, from getting into universities to getting housing loans from banks, a vast number of things. If you're an Indonesian immigrant to Malaysia and you convert from being, let's say, Christian or pagan Indonesian Javanese religion to Islam, then you'll also be given Bumiputra status with your identity card because you're Islamic. And that's the institution of Islam as opposed to the religion of Islam, which is a beautiful religion in many ways, but the institution, I think, is a completely different thing. I work in the film industry in Malaysia as a production designer. I'm working on a film at the moment called Spinning Gasing, which is about a bunch of young people with a whole set of the sort of young people problems that comes into it. Most of my work is actually installation based. The other piece of work that I'm currently working on is an installation with 2,000 snapshots, which are 4-hour size, faced inward, so the backs are facing outward. Snapshots to me are like social billboards. I love the idea of billboards. These are small billboards. I'd like them to be bigger. So that particular installation with the snapshots, there's a lot of text written on the backs of the photographs, because often with a photo album, the narrative that goes with that process of having a family album or taking photographs is just as important as the image itself. So when you initially look at the installation, what you see is the backs with this text on it, and then you can turn each one over to have a look at the image as well, and there's some stuff on the wall behind it. But predominantly I work in film. Making film, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow in Screen Culture, so I'm going to double up a bit. But one thing about the Malaysian film is that there's so many censorship problems that it's almost impossible to make your film. You cannot talk about sex, politics, religion, the haze, the economy, anything spiritual, any horror, any violence. You cannot show the underneath of a car because it promotes reckless driving. You cannot show a man with a hairy chest because it's sexy, but you can show him with a bare chest, not hairy, because that's not sexy. So these are the kind of problems that you deal with in the film industry. A film I worked on last year called Buka Api was made by, Buka Api translated means to open fire or to turn on fire. In street slang, it means to have sex with a client. And last year I worked with a wonderful bunch of Matnya or transsexual, transvestite community in KL that had the energy and the amazing capacity to get themselves organized to make a film about themselves, because what they found was their workshops and seminars on HIV transmission, hormone treatment, stuff like that, was in one ear, the other ear. So they decided to make this film and put this information in it as part of the narrative. And it was acted by themselves and all shot in their homes and everything, and it's a wonderful film. It will never be shown publicly in Malaysia for obvious reasons, but the life of the film was that they're going to make 2,000-3,000 copies, which they hand out free to their fellow sex workers, and that's the purpose of the film. So it's an amazing project.